and we are glad you are here. I'm Paul Winsky. I am the horticulture agent here in Harris County. Today we have Dr. Mung Mung Gu, who's in College Station, Laura Miller, who is commercial hort agent up in Tarrant County, Dr. Kevin Ong, who is our fearless leader on the plant pathology side, and our recently departed but still with us, Dr. Erfan Vafaie, who is stepping in today to help us out, and he is now representing BioWorks. So today's topic is bugs and fuzz, and I will toss it over to Kevin and Erfan.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Actually, my portion will be why you should use BioWorks for everything. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I just started this week, so I'm still fresh to BioWorks. Still feels like the Chat with Green Aggies is part of the family I'm in as well. So I appreciate y'all not throwing me out right away. So I think the topic for this week, I think this was kind of during, I think during Independence Day was kind of inspired, maybe. We were coming up with the topics and someone said, let's do red, white, and blue insects. So I said, you know what, I'm going to run with it. So doing red, white, and blue insects, call them some of America's most patriotic insects. And we'll see some examples of some that are perhaps not. Now, this is kind of a talking on some of the, really important insects or insect groups and how to essentially protect them. And a lot of this information is going to be already rather familiar. For example, starting off with something like honeybees, right? I mean, we all know honeybees are incredibly important, not only from an ecological perspective, or we see them as being important indicators of ecological health or other pollinator health, but also if you look at the right, they are of huge economic importance as well. So they help drive the U.S. economy. So they are hardworking Americans. And you can see here that they are responsible for 50% of soybean yields. You got almonds, 100% needs to be pollinated by honeybees. So you've got a lot of these different crops that they lean pretty heavy on cultivated honeybees, these beehives that are moved around. Is that a hand up? Is that a question, Mung Mung, or is that a?
I thought these these honeybees are European honeybees. Are they not?
Whoa. Why does it matter where they came from originally? They were born in the U.S., so they are amongst Americans, right? I mean,
okay, thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
They are living the American dream and helping making America a better place, and that's ultimately, isn't that what an American is, and so, yeah, they're not originally from Europe. Yes. And they're a domesticated bee and imported, but play a huge part in our economy and now kind of a part of our ecosystem as well. And if you look at, their value, U.S. value in millions of dollars by crop, and we compare, say, honeybees to wild bees, there are some situations where wild bees are more valuable than honeybees. So, for example, when it comes to Halloween time and all those pumpkins we got going around, wild bees are also incredibly important when it comes to pollination. So I do not want to discount at all the importance of wild bees in pollinating economically important crops. We also look at some of these others, though, like almond, for example, honeybees play a huge role. So on average, you could say over $2 billion worth of economic impact or increase in yields of almonds. Apples as well is another huge one for honeybees as well. When you go into this graph to the right, you can see that the scale on the y-axis here, this is from 1,000 to 4,000. Over here it goes from 100 to 600. So these are not quite as valuable crops overall in terms of how much honeybees impacts them, but still has a very large impact. And you know what? Honeybees, they're not just all hardworking and money earning. They also know how to dance. All right. They also do what's known as a bee dance to communicate with each other, sources of pollen, or nectar. So when a honeybee finds a good source of delicious goods, they'll come back like a true compatriot and tell all their other sisters of where that is. And they tell them, not using words or Snapchat, but rather by doing this bee dance. And the angle at which they do that dance within the hive tells the sisters essentially what angle relative to the sun that food source is located, and the intensity of that dance. So how hard she wiggles, goes around, she wiggles around again and goes back around. How hard she wiggles kind of tells those bees how far that food source is. And so now going into, so how can we protect these most important, hardworking American insects, right? And, I think many of us are already familiar with kind of this ban and push on neonicotinoids. And I do not want to put undue or extra stress on it, because there are a number of insecticides or pesticides in general that will have negative impacts on pollinators. But, I think maybe instead of, being disgruntled or disappointed, we can come from a perspective of understanding their importance and why some of these insecticides are being restricted, or why we might want to be cautious about their particular use. When you look at neonicotinoids, there are several different insecticide classes that are effective against several different groups of insects, such as beetles, caterpillars, flies, a lot of different sucking insect pests, such as, aphids, leaf hoppers, and so on and so forth. Some of the active ingredients you may be familiar with are imidacloprid, acetamiprid, thimethoxam, clethodim, and dinetefuran are probably some of the most common ones that we see in our industry. And kind of, the importance is, there are a number of insecticides that without a doubt have direct acute toxicity. You spray it on the insect and it kills them. There are other ones, for example, with this one that can have some more chronic long-term effects that are typically harder to measure. And for example, there was a study done where they looked at what's known as melanization. This is actually the immune system of the honeybees. All of these things are essentially would attack foreign bodies or foreign pathogens and things like that. So in a healthy individual, there are a lot of these dark foreign body, immune cell particles, you could say, that are helping fight foreign bodies. But when they are treated with different insecticides, when they're actually ingesting different insecticides, in this case, again, those neonicotinoids at sublethal doses, it is drastically decreasing their immune response. So it makes them, so even though that insecticide might not be the primary factor of causing mortality, it can make them more susceptible to other diseases and pathogens. So if we also look at, the maximum amount of how much honeybees can tolerate in terms of dosages. So these are the percentages of estimated LD50 based on maximum residues detected in pollen and nectar when these particular insecticides were applied. So we look at, for example, honeybees, depending on the insecticide, clethodim is one of those neonicotinoids. You can see that it's well above the LD50. That's a lethal dosage that can cause 50% mortality. When you look at some of these other insecticides that are still in the market, not all of them are necessarily going to be, a very high lethal dose when applied at label rates. And so it's very important. Again, that's why you'll notice the ones that are kind of higher, like clethodim and this imidacloprid, those are both neonicotinoids. And you can see across the board where data has been collected that those residues, insecticide residues that are left over, are almost quite a bit, always quite a bit higher than the LD50, that lethal dose that will be quite fatal. And additionally, there's been a lot of recent findings in, non-nectar or pollen sources of food, let's say from plants. For example, in grass, they do this guttation, right? Almost like sweating in the morning. And it's found that insecticide drenches for grubs can actually go into that guttation. And there's a lot of predatory insects or even some pollinators that can also feed on that. There's been some work done on just how to quickly reduce some of those neonicotinoids in that guttation. And that's by literally mowing very shortly after application. It can drastically reduce how much of that actually keeps moving up into the grass. Let's go on to the next bit here. And so for this reason, many of you may have noticed this pollinator box, I think they call it, or bee box, that's on a lot of insecticide labels now that tells you about the specific dangers of that particular insecticide and restrictions with its use around pollinators. Next, some of America's most important insects or patriotic insects are native predators and parasitic wasps. And we often don't think about the fact, especially in the landscape, that there are a lot of naturally occurring predators and parasitic wasps, like the movie Alien, that they're basically laying eggs in and killing their host in the natural environment, that are helping reduce what we would refer to as pest populations. We look at this tree as an example. This is produced by Kyle Gilder, who was a master's student at Texas A&M. You can see here, this is crepe myrtle. These are all herbivores. So there's actually, 7 different species of herbivores or pests that will feed on that particular crepe myrtle. But then there's a huge plethora, so from 9 to 25, so that's 16 insects that feed on those herbivores, different species of predators and wasps that help feed on those herbivores. And if we're not cautious about what we spray or apply, especially in the landscape, we can end up throwing off this balance and oftentimes hurting this very top part of the tree more than this part, so that when herbivores bounce back or migrate in, there's very few predators or wasps really established to knock their populations down or maintain some certain level of suppression. So here's a nice little example, right? Crepe myrtle bark scale and crepe myrtles. I always say in the landscape, be very cautious. For the most part, we haven't seen crepe myrtle bark scale kill crepe myrtles. It can just make them so aesthetically unpleasing that you might want to kill it yourself, is the saying, right? But if you can tolerate some of the poor aesthetics temporarily, in the long term, usually you have some things that will come in and provide some suppression. So here's an example. If we zoom in a little bit closer, these might look like crepe myrtle bark scale pupa or egg sacs, but actually the egg sacs are quite a bit smaller. These are the egg sacs right here. And the male pupa are even smaller than that, usually quite oblong and quite a bit smaller than even the egg sacs. These here are actually lady beetle larvae, or commonly known as ladybugs. But these particular larvae are native to the US and can help clean up crepe myrtles to the point where we've had trees that are highly infested in the landscape and want to do trials on. And a year later, when we go back, we haven't done any trials on them yet. They're all of a sudden not nearly as infested, presumably because these predators have come in and done a good job at drastically suppressing their populations. So, not all lady beetle larvae or ladybug larvae look like white waxy things. Some of them look like these little dragons here. You can see this one that's actually feeding on aphids. These aphids are using this metal trellis to actually go between plants, almost like a little highway. And this lady beetle larvae is loving it. It's like a highway food supply. Here's another little closer up photo that you can actually see. So this is a ladybug larva. And these here are actually aphid mummies. So these are aphids that are also in the process of being killed by a different type of predator. You've perhaps seen this video before of a parasitic wasp of aphids. So here's an example of one. Let's see if this video will actually play or not. It might be a little bit choppy on y'all's end, so I apologize for that. This wasp here, there are several of these naturally occurring in the landscape that will lay eggs in and or on a lot of insects we consider to be pests. So in this case, it's an aphid. It lays an egg inside that aphid. That egg develops into a larva and continues to feed on the insides of that aphid as the aphid continues to live and basically feed it until eventually there's nothing is left but the carcass of the aphid. And underneath that carcass is another wasp pupa. That wasp pupa will then metamorphose into a new wasp, cut out a nice little hole, and emerge as a new beautiful wasp, looking for anywhere between 1 to 300 aphids usually in their lifetime to lay eggs in. So these are also some naturally occurring parasitic wasps in our environment. Oh, that's it repeating. And that's not it. I mean, we have a lot. So here's another one known as minute pirate bugs or aureus, which are naturally occurring. And it's always said that as long as you have some prolonged source of pollen or nectar, especially pollen for the aureus, you can help maintain them in your garden or outside in the landscape or outside in your production areas. and help suppress, especially a lot of soft-bodied insect eggs and first instar nymphs. There's a lot of predatory mites as well, which has been seen in some instances where poor applications of some insecticides can actually result in increased pest mite populations. And in some cases, it's because the predatory mites are being hit harder because that insecticide is actually concentrating in the predator. The predator, the spider mite, only gets so much insecticide, but the predatory mite eats 10 of those, prey mites.
I think Erfan may be frozen in an awkward position.
Screenshot.
Quickly. But that brings me to something I really have been dying to say here. Since he started talking about crepe myrtle bark scale, Erfan.
Everyone's I missed the opportunity to.
He's back, but I still want to say this. In my opinion, the crepe myrtle is one of the most fantastic banker plant systems you can have in a landscape, because before we had bark scale, we just had that crepe myrtle aphid, but that's host specific. So it won't get on your other plants, unlike the bark scale, which can get on some other plants. But that's so host specific that it could serve as a great food source for predator insects all year round. And then the other cool thing that crepe myrtle does is it produces pollen right now when there's not that many things, going and blooming and producing a lot of pollen. So it's like extra minute pirate bug food in the middle of the end of summer when you don't have that many options. So crepe myrtles, they're great.
Can you all still hear me?
Plants.
Yes, Erfan, we can hear you. Yes.
Did I kind of die out or what happened?
Yeah, you froze.
Yeah, you froze out.
Yeah, you looked great when you were frozen. It was like this perfect, like you want to put that up as your profile pic somewhere.
Perfect. I'll start at the beginning of the presentation because I don't know where I froze. So I'll start at the very beginning. And just
sounds good.
No, what point did I lose y'all at?
Video. I think your video probably froze it. Your predatory.
Yeah, when you're moving to the next video after that.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll skip that predatory, the parasitic wasp video here.
Yeah, parasitic wasp video.
The parasitic wasp. The parasitic wasps are causing the problem.
Yeah, they are. They're parasitizing our presentation here.
Anyway, I just want to know how many people are actually allergic to crepe myrtle pollen.
I am not.
To what?
Allergic to crepe myrtle pollen? No.
Wow.
Never heard of that. You, Dr. Ong? No? Anybody?
I know some people are having seasonal allergies right now, trying to figure out what's out there.
I'm gonna say ragweed starting.
Well, yeah.
Yeah?
But ragweed is not as sexy as crepe myrtle. I think Erfan is frozen again.
I think he is.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Okay, even Laura. Okay, gosh, I thought Laura, you're frozen too.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'm frozen. Kevin.
So anyway, if you need me to go on, I need somebody to pull up the slide set. So.
Okay. Let's see.
Can you pull up the slide set for me?
You all just bear with us for a moment, and I'll pull up the slide set.
So somebody did, oh, by the way, before you forget, you might want to screenshot too, because that's a good shot for Erfan for his profile picture.
It's a profile picture.
Another good one.
I think Erfan got taken out by parasitic wasps.
Yeah. I think
so. So Erfan is joining in back.
Ah.
Yep, there he is.
Oh,
All
wow.
right, thing. And that should do it.
So
All
we're
right.
back.
Yeah,
Thank
y'all
you.
can see it. All right, sorry about that. All right, so we also have some.
Erfan, hold on. In case you freeze up again, can you send me the link in the chat so that I can play it?
Link to the chat. Link to what?
Link to this file.
I don't. Let me see if I.
Is it on our drive, shared drive?
It is. It is. It is not on the shared drive. No.
Well, never mind. Just continue.
Yeah. All right. Continue on.
Yeah, this is the a little disadvantage after we kicked you out.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Or after I walked out. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So all right. So next, going on to, I mean, it's not only good native predators and parasitic wasps. There are some non-native, some that have been, say, naturalized in the U.S. that are also excellent predators and you know, very good U.S. patriots, if you might say. So this one, Sanosia, is also known as hunter flies, originally from Europe. And they can accelerate. So they actually accelerate. They hunt from top down. They'll you know, use gravity to assist them. They'll accelerate at 36 meters per second squared. What that means essentially is they're going about 4 Gs. So they're experiencing 4 times you know, the acceleration of gravity when they're going for predators and for prey. Just to put that into perspective, the fastest person on Earth accelerates at 9.5 meters per second, so about 1/4 of the speed of this fly. So it's pretty incredible to think how quickly it accelerates. Now it can kill a lot of fungus gnat larvae in its larval stage. So it has an immature larval stage that will actually live in the soil and feed on fungus gnat larvae, and then as an adult, it will feed on other adult flies. And so there's been a lot of work recently done on, you know, how to essentially cultivate or encourage their populations, because they have been seen perching up in greenhouse type settings. They do like perching up on little rafters or wires and things like that, because again, they sit up top and look for prey down below, and they will swoop down to catch them. And I'd mentioned earlier that there was some work done where now, you know, we want to be very careful with these excellent allies that we have to not really hurt them, right? And so there was some work done looking at different types of pests or predators. So in this case, we have either an untreated or a treated plant. So this is treated with imidacloprid. And in the presence of that imidacloprid, the pest populations actually increased in many instances. And when they actually tried to look at the reasons why, was when they looked at the predators, the opposite trend was occurring, not only for feeding rate. So when there was an insecticide treated, their feeding rate drastically decreased, but also their mobility also drastically decreased. Again, there were findings related to this basically biomagnification, right? So the pest was getting a small dosage of that insecticide, but the predators feeding on that multiple of those pests was increasing in that dosage. So let's go on, since we're a little bit back here. So there are a number of excellent guides and apps that you can get. So if you're kind of curious, especially in the landscape type setting, you don't want to hurt these natural predators and parasitic wasps, because they do a lot of work without you even really seeing it. I do recommend getting one of these apps. There's Side Effects Guide by Coppert or BioBest Side Effects Guide. And in there, you can actually type in the active ingredient of the insecticide, and you can see the potential side effects or, you know, acute effects on different life stages of those predators. So an excellent resource for actually, you know, taking a little bit closer at some of the things you're applying and how it might impact some of those natural predators and parasitic wasps. Now, the spotted lanternfly, you'll notice here, I've put crossing borders, right? We've got a few new invasives to keep an eye out for. And this one included, because you'll see a little bit later, it has red and white on it. It's just missing the blue to make it red, white, and blue. But major invasive that was introduced to Pennsylvania in 2014. Its preferred plant host for actually completing its reproductive life cycle is a tree of heaven, but they're actually considered a relatively generalist pest. And you'll notice their populations can become incredibly abundant. So look at that. That's all that spotted lanternfly. And they produce a copious amount of honeydew. So if you were to see a video, you'd see them actually, well, if I were to show you the video, you'd see me freeze again and probably my Zoom crash. But if you were to watch a video, you would see honeydew just shooting out of them really rapidly. And so you can quickly get a lot of sooty mold production as well. And it, again, feeds on over 70 plant hosts, including grapes, hops, apples, cherries, stone fruits, and walnuts. In terms of their general life cycle, they will lay these large groupings of eggs, and you get these different immature stages that are usually quite dark with white spots. And then later in life, they get the red coloration, and in the adult stage, they will become winged. So here's what that egg mass looks like. And here's what that adult looks like with the wings kind of spread out. And you can see that white and red, again, no blue. But if you see these, so they have not yet really been reported as established in Texas. So if you see them, please report either to your local county extension agent or to the TDA. We also have two more invasives I was going to cover. One is the elm zigzag sawfly. So here's the actual adult here, relatively nondescript. And here's the larva. And we'll see here in a moment, there's one other kind of sawfly, general sawfly on elm that also occurs. And so you can distinguish between those two. And what distinguishes a sawfly, say, from a caterpillar, because this looks a lot like a caterpillar, is actually these little fleshy legs. So sawflies tend to have, I think it's over 5 pairs of fleshy legs, whereas caterpillars will have less than that. And the adult obviously doesn't become a moth or a butterfly. It's actually a type of wasp. And they're called this zigzag sawfly because of that zigzag pattern that they do. And in abundant numbers, they can, greatly defoliate an elm. And so, they're kind of important from that economic standpoint. So if you see any of these, any of that characteristic zigzag damage on elm, again, be sure to report that as well. And here's what this is another type of elm sawfly, which is not as concerning as this elm zigzag sawfly. So this one is already kind of present. And then this box tree moth is probably another, of major concern. Is actually was first introduced to North America in Toronto, up in Canada. I have a buddy who's an architect and landscaper up there. So I said, hey guys, look, this is from Toronto. And he said, oh shoot, should I protect all my boxwoods? And it's like, well, might be a bit of a problem. You want to keep an eye out open for these ones. There is a USDA press release here. You can use your phone right now to get to that press release. Has some excellent information on it. But we are expecting this to be a moth that's going to start migrating further down south. So it has already been seen in the US as well. And this is what the actual caterpillar looks like. And they are also defoliators and relatively broad spectrum, but mostly box trees. So definitely, considered a major pest when it comes to those types of plants as well. There's an excellent article, and so there's actually 2 articles here. One is through Penn State Extension. It's ever so slightly outdated because it talks about the box tree caterpillar as if it's going to infest the U.S., but it has been established here. There is this excellent article. If you Google pest talks box tree moth, you'll find this. It's a PDF, a couple pager PDF by JC. I highly recommend subscribing to his articles. Excellent information, always really up to date with some of the most recent news in terms of pests or pesticides that are relevant to the industry. Now I'm going to pass it on to Kevin Ong.
All right. I guess I didn't get the assignment right because, I'm just going to show pictures and tell stories. So Erfan, if you could go ahead, we talk about patriotic, red, white, and blue. And when we talk about diseases, whether it's biological or non-biological, this is one that a bunch of years ago, this was Dr. Cynthia McKinney sent me these photos from a greenhouse because she was having all this particular variety, all the leaves turning red and wondering what it was. And it finally dawned on us what it was cold conditions. This was a stress response that can give you that nice reddish color. So this is to start off on our red, white, and blue on plant diseases. So next slide, please. All right, some cool red stuff. Now, you can look at this fungus or fungi or conch or whatever you want to call it as cool stuff. I actually have one of those large ones that a painter took and did a painting on it. It's sitting on my shelf in my office. And the image on the right is actually a red bud that fell over just outside of the new plant pathology building. And it was something that I kept an eye for a couple of years. Well, no, the last 2 years, because it had some of this fungi growing on it. It was identified by Dr. Dave Apple as Ganoderma sicily. And basically it caused a nice wood rot, and eventually through heavy winds that little red bud fell over. Now, what typically you would see on tree stump is those reddish coloration, oftentimes with sort of a light color. And there are some species that I know are harvested and used for medicinal purposes. But I just want to show you some other reds. Let's see what's on the next slide. Oh, yes. You know, one thing about rose rosette disease caused by the rose rosette virus is this symptom called reddening. Well, it is not always the case, because a rose plant can be positive for rose rosette disease, but not show any of the reddish coloration. But on most of the shrub roses, the extra red color is often accompanies the abnormal growth of the leaf, which actually are symptoms that would suggest potential rose rosette disease symptoms. So you got two different pictures here. These were pictures that my former graduate student took, and it just have this really nice coloration. Now, depending on the varieties too, you can get really bright reds, or in some cases like the knockout roses, you get more of that deep red. And even with knockout roses, you know, even if it's a healthy rose with new growth, you would get some of those deep maroon red coloration. Just a quick update on rose rosette disease. This year has been quite interesting in Texas, in that the cold weather somehow resulted in a lot of roses that look real pretty right now. We have a few reports of rose rosette popping up again as the temperature gets warmer. I'm would be real interested to see how that progressed through the year. But as far as we know this year, most of the roses in the landscape have been looking outstanding with colors and floral load. Next slide, please.
Dr. Ong, we're not even in the triple digit yet, so it's not warm enough.
Not yet, but you know, I was hoping the cold stress would kill more roses, but hey, doesn't work that way, I guess, because I know Laura Miller got excited, because one of the things about rose rosette is we do know that infected plants do not put good carbohydrates down in the root. So you would expect those infected plants to be less cold tolerant. But the last time we had a cold incidence was, 2 years ago or a year ago, 2 years ago. And I thought we would have a bunch of die-off in Dallas, and very few died through that cold incidence. And then I learned that Dallas area was a good heat sink. I think almost a 10 to 12 degree heat sink. So I got real excited at the Snowmageddon, because I thought, hey, maybe it will get cold enough. And I see Laura shaking her head. So I guess we must go colder, huh, Laura?
It did not get cold enough to kill roses. They are alive and kicking.
So this is an example of a good-looking weed that horticulturists have taken and commercialized it to give you roses. Anyway, let's talk about this chart here. This bacteria. So bacteria are close and dear to my heart. So the image on the right with all those, Texas A&M logo and stuff, that was actually stuff that we wrote on Petri dishes using cultures of Serratia marcescens. Now, Serratia is a bacteria that you might probably find in your shower, that red stuff. So it's naturally pigmented red, but it is a plant pathogen on some cucurbit vines. So squash vines and all that. causing wine wilt. And so serratia marcescens that we can isolate and grow on that, and that's just on straight up nutrient agar. It will naturally produce a red pigment, and what those are pigments that would capture iron, hence the red color. Now on the left is a slide, a petri dish with a culture of Ralstonia solanacearum, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about that bacteria because, namely, it is grown, that plate is actually on a tetrazolium chloride plate. So because of this bacteria growing on that plate with that chemical in there, it actually result in that red pigmentation. So if you were to grow this stuff on, let's say, nutrient agar like the one on the right, you will not get that reddish coloration. In fact, it will just be creamy. But this red is so cool because Ralstonia solanacearum is actually on the select agent list. And if you don't know what that is, it's on the bad guy list. And we had a couple of incidents where Ralstonia solanacearum was intercepted in the US. And here I want to make it clear, we do have Ralstonia solanacearum in the US, but there are several different races and biovars. And so on the danger list, or you might say the select agent list, is Ralstonia solanacearum race 3 biovar 2, a very specific race and strain. The reason is it's one of those that have devastated the potato industry in other countries. It's a cold tolerant strain. We do not have it in the United States. We have a strain called race 1, strain, which is really common in the southeast and in the south, where it would basically cause bacterial wilt of tomatoes, potatoes, as well as tobacco. The problem with Ralstonia solanacearum is it can also infect ornamentals like your geraniums, pelargoniums, and some of the other bedding type plants. The couple of incidents where it had been introduced to the United States and intercepted was on geraniums. The most recent was a couple last year. So what happens when something like this happened? If it was intercepted, if it was caught, most of the time USDA will initiate what is known as trace forward, and wherever those cuttings are sent to a commercial operation, those operations would get inspected. There would be stop sale involved, a lot of checking to make sure that this bacterium does not get established or is not established in that nursery. So this is one of those quote unquote invasive. It does come in. We hope it never gets established and it'll just be eradicated. And it's one of those that we're concerned because the last few incidents we have seen the introduction of this bacterium through the ornamental trade. Our biggest concern with that is really more on the food production side of it. But the fact that the pathway utilizes an ornamental pathway does concern some folks. All right, let's move to the next slide. We're done. Oh yeah, this is a symptom of the Ralstonia solanacearum on geraniums. Next, please. Now let's go to the whites. So for whites, what we have here is an image of a crepe myrtle at the Centennial Garden in Georgia. So is it Centennial Olympic Gardens in Georgia? And it was great. I was out there walking. Well, great. Clarification here is I'm a plant pathologist, so I thought it was great. You walk around and you look at all these plants and you think, oh my gosh, did they have a lot of blackbirds or something pooping on it? And you walk closer and no, it's not bird poop, but it's powdery mildew. And so what we do find with powdery mildew is fungus with several genera in it, and it will infect many different types of plants. And in fact, I think the next slide is powdery mildew on actually squash. No, this is zucchini, I think. That was in my own garden. Do I have a next one on roses or something? No, I don't. But anyway, that's a white for you, powdery mildew. And this one kind of looks like powdery mildew, but it's not. It's on pumpkin, and you're probably gonna see it more coming up as we move towards the fall. But this disease, this fungal disease that causes those type of symptoms with that nice white mycelia, and in fact, where the cursor is pointing to a little white balls, that is the stud of the sclerotia. I love this pathogens because those little tiny white balls will start getting brownish, reddish brown, and that sclerotia is a survival structure. I guess Erfan is running those curses around that right now, or maybe it's Mung, I don't know. But those sclerotia can last for years. And I do have a collection of sclerotia from everywhere. And I do want to thank Paul Winsky for sending me the anemone with the southern blight. That's the common name of this fungus, Sclerotium rofsii, or better known, the new name is Athalia rofsii. And it's a really cool fungi because that hyphae, it's just snow white. Now, next slide, please. This is one picture that was taken, I believe, in 2017 or so. But it's on snapdragons, and the snapdragons, the complaint was it looks like it was melting out, it was blighting. But then when you start looking at it, you find this snow white mycelia. And so you think, oh my gosh, let's look for sclerotia and let's see if it is the Athalia or Sclerotium rofsii. In this case, it was not, but it was a relative, a cousin of that Sclerotium rofsii, and this is Sclerotinia species. It does produce a sclerotia, but the sclerotia is not nice, round, and reddish brown, but instead it looks a little bit more like rat poop, black, a little bit funky in shape, but still fun to play with because it will last a long time if you keep it dry, and it will continue to infect plants if you take it out 2 or 3 years later. So what is the implication of this? If you do see those snow white mycelia and you see funky structures that look like tiny rocks or little marbles, or what looks like slow release fertilizer, miniaturized slow release fertilizer, be real concerned about that. I think most of the time this is going to be on artificial media or grow on soilless media that can be destroyed, thrown out, or sterilized. But if this was in your soil environment, realize those sclerotia could be long-term survival structures for that fungi that can continue to come out and infect plants later, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. So, okay, next slide, please. So this was one of a major problem, I guess, a bunch of years ago on impatiens. So I guess, hey, Paul, what's that behind you? Petunias or impatiens? I can't tell.
Petunias.
Oh, darn. So this thing doesn't really get on petunias, but it does a number of impatiens, and it's a downy mildew. It's a water mole. So we got fall leaves here, and one of the things is this is on the underside of those leaves. The leaf on the left is what I would call a clean leaf, just that nice green, maybe some silvery on it. But when you look at those infected leaves, especially the second leaf from the left, it's just covered. And you might not be able to see this on this picture, but if you take a close look or even feel it, it is fuzzy. So that's one of the reasons why it's called downy mildew. And I had a colleague from who used to be at Florida. He took a video of this where on an infected plant where he would flick the leaf and you just see this plume of white cloud go up, and those are the spores being released. And that's white for you on bedding plants, impatiens, downy mildew. I think over the past few years, downy mildew has not been used a lot because of this problem. I think it's making a comeback right now. For those same colors, I think the recommendation has gone to using New Guinea impatiens, the Hawkeri, for those colors. So it'll be interesting to see if we do have new resistance coming out with some of the new impatiens that are being back in the market. Next slide, please. Oh, yes. And this is one that a county agent sent to me wondering if it was some kind of mildew on some cucurbit leaves. I think it was cucumber leaves or something. I don't even remember what it was. And I took a look and I called him up and I said, hey, can you flake it off? And he said, yeah. And you know what I told him it was? Oh, salt or something that was in the water. So when you do water plants, and if there's fertilizer in it, if it's sometimes salt, you can have those accumulation of that water evaporation, leaving a residue of that chemical there. Now, if it's some sort of active chemical, whether it's a pesticide or even if it's salt, that can actually damage the plant material or the plant tissue as it tries to expand. And I think you do see some damage here that occurred on that expanding leaf. So that's another white on the blood part of pathogens. In this case, it's a non-biological pathogen. Next slide, please. Now let's go to blue. You know, the part about blue is that's so difficult to find something that is blue in plants. We do have some, I guess you could say some blue slime molds, but that's pretty rare. But I want to show you one fungus that is blue. And this is Lactarius indigo. It's a mycorrhizal fungus. It's a mushroom of a mycorrhizal fungus. Supposedly it's edible. Now, I didn't try this. This was actually a picture from a mushroom foray in North Carolina. Oh, Dr. Gu has a hands up. Did you eat
No.
this
Is this bolete? One of the boletes.
No. I don't know which one it is. I know it's Lactarius. I know it's supposed to be, well, put it this way, people who ate this before are still alive. But it's blue. It's the closest blue thing. You might call it a Smurf house.
So does it turn blue when the underside is bruised? When you
No, actually, the Lactarius indigo, the underside is actually blue too.
Oh, it's blue. Okay, so this is not one of the boletes. Okay.
No. I think I have a bolete in my garden that's yellow, but you cut it and it turns blue, stain. So let's move to the next one and see what else I got. Oh yeah, that's a blue slime mold. So this was actually on the side of my house. If you look on the photo on the right, it looks blue, and then there's a close up of it on the left, where okay, so it's more like whitish blue, but you know, it's close blue. It's real hard to find a pathogen that is true blue. I do know where you can get blues though, because if you got pathogens affecting your plants, yeah, we got humans that have the blues. And I think that might be my last slide in the slide set, right? So yeah, so back to you, Mang. So that is my contribution to the red, white, and blue for the month of July. You know, didn't say anything about being patriotism, but I love colors and pictures. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ong. Thank you, Dr. Vafaie.
Pleasure.
Yeah, well, let's wait a few minutes, see whether we have any questions. And at the meantime, Laura and Paul, do you have any comments about the red, white, and blue that Dr. Vafaie and Dr. Ong were presenting today?
No, I have nothing.
It was interesting to see the bacteria and when it's plated out. And I guess some of the, I used to do tissue culture work, and when we did rice anther culture, we would make designs out of anthers. And so it's good to see that they streak their plates and make designs in order to help the time go by a little bit more quickly.
The plant clinic have more in our art collection, pathogenic art collection.
I am imagining now in the lab just people entertaining themselves with this kind of artwork.
No, it's not entertainment. It's called mental stress relief.
Right.
Strategies.
Right.
I think that's a technical term for entertainment.
Don't know. Hey,